and it's taken a while to get the right people in the right place at the right time. So we're really excited to be taking this webinar forward. Just a quick note to everybody about how it works. We're starting at 10 promptly today because we've got three people presenting today. So often people join later. And as it says there, we'll send around a link to the YouTube recording. And please do share this as widely as you can. If anybody's got questions as we go forward, if you type it in the little questions box, you'll see that on your panel on the right-hand side of the screen. And Ines will come back to the questions once we've heard from the three presenters. That's Borja, Molly, and Sian this morning. So without further ado, we've got Borja online in Kazakhstan, I think, Molly in Italy, Sian in Leeds in the UK, Ines in London, and me down in the southwest of England. So people from all over Europe speaking this morning, and hopefully you'll find what they've got to say really interesting. So, as I said, the webinar is about older people and community living. Borja's going to give us an overview around human rights and an aging population. Marcello, who was going to be speaking with Molly, but it's going to be Molly now, is going to talk a bit about her work on the organisation she works for around dementia friendly villages and supporting older people to get out and about. And then Sian's going to be sharing some of the learning from Community Catalysts, which is around setting up small providers in offering personal support to people in local communities. So without further ado, I'm going to change the screen over to Borja, and over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks so much for the introduction. Indeed, I'm in Kazakhstan because the World Health Organization has their European primary healthcare center in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, and we were invited here. They are very much interested in working on long-term care for old people. So that was actually very timely also for this webinar. So I was quite lucky that some of the slides I prepared for that WHO meeting, I can use them again now. So thanks a lot for inviting H and involving us in this webinar, because community living for all people and the access of all people on equal footing to community life is a really key topic, as you know. And it's really one that has been really important in our discussions over the last 2-3 years, especially. So I'm really happy that we can share the work we have been doing on that front in these last years, and in general the work we are doing in let's say building a human rights understanding of older age. So there you go, the title of my presentation. So equality and participation towards a human rights-based approach to older age. The summary: I will start presenting Age Platform, what we do, our goals, the kind of organization we are and why we exist. Secondly, I will talk about ageism, and I will explain its impact on the dignity of older people and also its pervasiveness. And third, I will talk about our human rights agenda for old age. So Age Platform Europe, my organization, is a network of 110 organizations across the European Union. And we have a wide diversity of members, but the vast majority of them are organizations of older people themselves who advocate for their well-being and for their rights at the local, regional, or national levels. We are supported by the European Union through a grant under the Rights, Equality and Citizenship program. And we are involved both in advocacy work and also in research projects. So we do the advocacy work in all European policy processes, also in United Nations processes, those regarding the human rights of all people. And we are also working closely with researchers in research all fields you can imagine, socially human sciences, or also in ICT, healthcare, etc., in order to make research more adapted to or more able to respond to the needs and the realities of older people. So why age? Traditionally, let's say that the work of organizations of old people had been very much focusing on pension issues, on access to social security, and that's certainly a very important part of the work of many of our members across Europe. But in the last years, well, there's been, let's say, well, the agenda of organizations of old people, it's been widened up in the sense that we have realized that there are so many aspects in which the dignity of all people are actually are at stake. So many aspects of life, in so many situations, the dignity, the equality of all people is really compromised. So age is there to, let's say, challenge misconceptions about older age, and also to widen up the agenda of aging issues, and to remind that the dignity of all people is at stake in many more situations that we may sometimes think. And this is what brings me to the concept of ageism. So ageism is, I would say, the main barrier to equal participation in society that age is working to fight. Ageism is a word that is not yet very much used, that you may not be able to translate in your own language. Think about it. Or if you can, maybe you haven't heard that much about this word. So it's actually one type of prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination that is probably less well known than others. But if you ask citizens, ageism and this experience of discrimination in old age is the most frequently mentioned type of discrimination in the EU, according to the 2015 Eurobarometer on discrimination. So we are far from an anecdotal phenomenon. We are confronted to a very pervasive reality of discrimination, of stereotyping, of prejudice around older people. Here you go, some quotes that somehow reveal ageist attitudes and ageist conceptions. And all of them may be familiar with you. The first one, older people are too expensive for the system. So looking at older people as in the cost perspective. Older people screwed the young in the Brexit referendum. This is so, well, let's say in every newspaper, right? We all know older people lose their taste as they age. Old people like having loads of things at home. So every of this is really different, and they have different, let's say, harmful effects, but all of them have a harmful effect. And why? Because in a way, ageism is the barrier, the intellectual barrier that prevents us from taking old people, considering old people in their individuality, in the diversity of experiences, in the diversity of needs, in the diversity of expectations and wishes. So ageism is, in a way, the stereotyping that makes us think that all people are a separate group in society, homogeneous, that think the same, act the same, have the same needs. And this is absolutely false. Actually, if anything, as we go old, we keep our differences, and these differences may keep increasing. So actually, older age is not a period of life of homogeneity, of equal needs for everyone. Ageism is the barrier that prevents us from realizing that. And the impacts of ageism are diverse. I listed some of them. First, the limitation of the participation to community life. There are activities that we consider not to be for the old. In a way, we are, let's say, preventing old people from getting involved in certain activities that we think are not for them. The invisibility as victims of crime. We know from what we know from police forces and from law enforcement bodies, we know that victims of crime, as they are older, they tend to be taken less seriously. And this is very clear in the case of older women who have experienced intimate partner violence. The denial of sexuality. We live in the idea that all people don't have a sexuality. This is harmful for everyone in older age, but it's also very harmful, especially for older LGBTI individuals. There is a clear lack of exchanges across generations as well. We know that age is one of the factors that structures human relationships the most. So if I ask you to think of how many friends you have that are 20, 30 years older than you may actually not come up with many people, but we may have friends of a different ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, etc. There is also the issue of violence and abuse and the denial of autonomy that I will elaborate a bit more on. Regarding abuse of all people, ageism is not directly the driver of elder abuse, but ageism, this stereotyping of all people, acts, let's say, as a contextualizing element or factor of abuse, or a factor that makes us think that abuse or violence against all people is not as traumatic as for other groups in population, as for example, children. Abuse is experienced by 3% of older people, according to the World Health Organization, and 25% of those with higher needs. But if you consider the very wide impacts of ageism on the dignity of all people, and if you adapt a wider vision on abuse, you may actually realize that it is much more extended, it's much more prevalent than these numbers show. Regarding autonomy, I put here a quote that we included in the European Quality Framework for Long-Term Care Services, and that is really, really prevalent, and that you may yourselves have come across at some point. This is the testimony of an old person. I am afraid my daughters will decide suddenly to send me to a residential care home without talking about it to me beforehand. I like living alone, and I would prefer to stay at home if possible. So this person is living in the fear that a decision, such an important decision, will be taken on her back. And actually, this is also showing to what extent decisions about care and support do not depend on the preference of the individual, but depend on the opinions of others around that may not be the best reflection of the actual needs and wishes of the person. So this prevalence of ageism is what makes us really interested and really active in the human rights agenda, because we see its harmful effects, and we also see that we really need to raise awareness of it. And we believe that putting it in the human rights agenda, in international human rights discussions, is the right way to actually have an impact on policies, laws that are perpetuating, and also attitudes that are perpetuating ageism. So we need to address it. And the human rights agenda allows us to check reality with new eyes, to identify breaches of dignity that we may have thought were not that serious. So actually thinking in terms of human rights, learning from a human rights approach that has been built for other groups in population, like people with disabilities or children, that helps us, let's say, make a check of reality and realize that ageism is having effects in many, many aspects, in many domains, and that many things that have been taken for normal are not actually normal and should be challenged. So that's the second point I included. So we need to stop justifying or contextualizing ageist attitudes, laws, and policies. Sometimes policies and laws include age limits that are not fully justified. And they are there because, well, that's the way things have been for a long time. For example, I can give now the example, in some countries, if you have acquired a disability at a younger age, when you reach retirement age, you stop being a disabled person. Or if you have an accident when you are 70, and you have a disability afterwards, you may not be entitled to disability support because you are old. These kind of limits, we don't think are justifiable. I mean, you can justify some, but that shouldn't be the principle. The principle should be equality and non-discrimination. So it's important to highlight problems. I highlighted the issues we have. That's really essential. That's really one big part of the work. But the other big part of the work we have to do is also thinking of what paradigm of dignity in old age we are putting forward. It's not just about pointing to issues. It's also thinking of, what could be a game changer in terms of thinking of old age in a human rights friendly or compatible way. And the idea is pretty simple. That's the one we always insist on is the fact that we need full equal participation of older people in society. That should be at the core of all policies, and that should be at the core of a human rights vision of old age. So it is about moving from a paternalistic vision to a human rights approach of old age. The paternalistic vision is, of course, none of these two exist fully in reality, but we know that we are still perpetuating very much a very paternalistic vision of old age. We are often talking about the protection of all people. stressing very much protection, best interest. We know what is best for the old person without actually asking, without actually supporting the reflection of the old person about what his needs and wishes are. We talk a lot about safety, but because we talk a lot about safety, we may sometimes be creating situations where the autonomy of the person is completely limited. There is a denial of legal capacity and still very much used figure of guardianship that is really not compatible with the ability of the person to make autonomous decisions, and also the lack of self-determination of, the capacity to determine how you live and what do you do with your life, etc. So we need to move from that to this other vision of full and equal participation in society, of supported decision making as well, of autonomy and independent living that should apply fully to older age, and of course community inclusion, active participation in community life on equal footing with anyone else in society. And regarding this participation in community, in parallel to our human rights work, but actually in a very cross-cutting way, because the two cross at some point, we have worked a lot on advancing the concept of age-friendly environments. So actually afterwards, Marcello and Molly will talk about dementia-friendly environments. We have worked a lot on age-friendly environments, which is an initiative that was conceptualized by the World Health Organization. There is a global network. We created a European network of age-friendly municipalities and regions. So this is a way of looking at policies in a very comprehensive way, thinking of all the areas that have an impact on the participation of all people in society, and making improvements and making change in order to allow older people to effectively be involved in community life. So here you go, the three main areas where changes are required: in the physical environment, in social environment, and also in the municipal services. And across these 8 areas, changes are needed in order to allow older people to be active, participate in society in equality with others. So this is certainly one idea that will help us implement this approach of human rights to older age. So this is a question we get a lot. So then, if we are asking for all this, isn't the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities enough? We get this question a lot. And sometimes it's a question we get to block any discussions that we may want to advance on the human rights of all people. So we know that most people with disabilities are older people. We know that 46% of older people have disabilities. And certainly there is much work to be done still to fully explore how the CRPD can apply in old age, because we know that old people are very much invisible in the CRPD committee, the committee of the convention. We know that there are still many age limits in access to disability support. The one I was mentioning before is quite a good example, and it exists in such limits exist in different countries. So certainly, there is at some point there are many cross-cutting issues, and of course you can look also at the interaction between ageism and having a disability. But we believe that it's not enough. So certainly the CRPD is a great tool, and certainly we are interested in exploring further how we can apply in old age, and we have worked quite a lot actually on that. But we believe that we need also instruments, and we also need discussions that can address ageism as such, because it's a phenomenon that affects all old people at some point in different, probably in different degrees, but everyone, for the virtue by the fact of getting old, may experience barriers that are associated with being old. So we need to address specifically ageism. We need specific responses, as this is such a strong societal phenomenon with such a harmful effect on individuals. And also because we know that old people and ageism as such are currently absent from human rights system. So all existing conventions, except maybe the Convention on the Rights of the Child, they all apply to all people, but all people as such are not explicitly mentioned, and there is no explicit addressing of ageism as a type of discrimination. So we think these are arguments in favor of advancing, let's say, separate discussions on the human rights of all people, but of course learning a lot from how the CRPD was done and how the CRPD is applying. The very good news is that we do have such a forum where we can be discussing the human rights of all people, and that's the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group on Aging that was created already some years ago. It was created in 2011. And this group was created by the General Assembly of the United Nations because states believed that there were issues regarding the protection of the human rights of all people. And they created the group with a mission to explore what's the level of enjoyment of human rights by all people and the feasibility of further instruments and measures. So whether we need some further action around the human rights of all people. And that's what we are currently discussing every year in every session in New York. The next one, the 10th session, will take place in April 2019. We have had discussions on care for all people over the past 2 years. So this year, actually, we had discussions, and also next year we will have another discussion. This year it was more of a substantive discussion. Next year it's a normative discussion. So we have to enter into the details of how a right to long-term care could look like in an international convention. Without actually being the convention, I will refer to that, without that being explicitly a mission of the group. That was our key message. We need a shift from paternalistic care to community-based, person-centered care and support. So this is a reflection of the shift in the vision of old age that I was talking about before. So from the paternalistic vision to a very human rights-based vision of old age. So regarding the convention, are we actually working towards a convention on the rights of all people? Maybe not. We don't know. Discussions are going on in the United Nations. European countries are very much divided. Some of them are very motivated, very committed, without showing a very explicit support for a convention. Some others are against. Some others do not show up, actually. So, I think we are experiencing some progress. I think things are moving slowly, but things are moving in terms of realizing the pervasiveness, of ageism and the need to take action to address it. So we are making progress, and that's the good news. To finalize, I was a bit long. Before ending, actually, I wanted to point you to this website. It's a campaign that we have been running for the last two months. Now it's over, but all the materials in there are still accessible. It's a campaign on ageism to mark the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have counted on the support of many stakeholders. It's a campaign that includes, you will find them in the website, lots of testimonies, data, lots of good practices around ageism. So if you access the website, you will have a greater understanding of ageism, and well, hopefully you will get to understand it much better and take action in your own field to see the cross-cutting issues, because we have explored ageism in the campaign in cross-cutting way with other types of discrimination, such as sexism, migrant status, sexuality, etc., etc. And here is a resource that is very freshly out from the printer. It's the result of a seminar we had today with the United Nations Human Rights Office in Europe. We had a seminar in April, and this reflects the conclusions from this seminar. This is not a final product, let's say, at the end of our discussions on the human rights of all people, but in the report, quite short, you will find some key ideas of how we can build a human rights-based approach to older age. And I will finalize with a quote from a colleague from Age Platform Europe's Human Rights Officer, which in my view is really very clear and explains what I was referring to in my presentation. The human rights of older people are not the rights of minority. They are not the rights of one generation. They are the same human rights that we should all continue to enjoy regardless of age. They are our human rights in older age. So we actually all have a personal interest in advancing the human rights in older age. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Borja. Sorry, it's always good to remember to start talking when you've unmuted yourself and everybody can hear you. That's really useful. Going to swiftly move on to Molly. Molly, I'm going to swap screens with you, and hopefully it'll all work. Over to you, Molly.
Thank you. Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Borja, for the great presentation. My colleague is just trying to open the PowerPoint. I hope you can see it there. I'm going to try and talk about the work that we're doing in Italy, in what's called the Pellici Valley, in northwestern Italy. And it follows on quite well from Borja's presentation, because it's about actually how we're trying to put into practice this desire and right for people to live as part of their community. And so I manage a project called Out and About with Dementia, which is about developing dementia-friendly communities. And at the heart of the project and our approach is giving a voice to people with dementia and making sure that it's heard. And about creating real choices for people when it comes to community living, or living as part of their community, even if they're part of, or even if they're living in a residential care centre. So I think it's important that you understand where we are. I am part of an organisation called the Refuge, Rifugio Carlo Alberto in Italian, which is a semi-residential and residential care home, which is part of the Valdensian Church. And as you can see, we're a very rural setting. And I think this is important to note, because it gives an idea of the isolation that people feel, perhaps generally, and especially when they have either dementia or other disabilities. And I think it also gives an idea of the kind of communities that we're working with, because they're generally small and medium-sized towns. So I will just run through this very quickly. This is, if you like, the development of the refuge. It was founded 120 years ago as a refuge for people who were not really accepted in other care structures, because they were Valdensian, they were Protestants, because they had mental illnesses that were not accepted in other places. So it has continued. It started in this vein and has continued in this way. And in the year 2000, the refuge opened a day centre for people with dementia. And this basically started what's now 18 years of a process of listening to people with dementia in order to develop services that are adapted to them rather than necessarily the other way around. And just to give you an example of this, for example, something that was started a number of years ago was, rather than giving people breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, because breakfast is served at 8 o'clock, we decided that breakfast should be served when people woke up. So we devised a system of having cameras in the bedrooms so that the care workers were able to go to the person as they woke up. So this was one of the first changes that we made towards adapting our organisation to the people that we're supporting. Over the years, a number of more non-pharmacological therapies and community activities, including intergenerational activities, have been developed, and we now have over 70 staff and 100 volunteers, and about 70% of the 104 people who live in the refuge or come to the refuge have dementia. And in 2014, we were awarded an EFID award, which is the European Foundations for Initiatives on Dementia. And this was for the project called Ambassadors for Alzheimer's, which was basically the way in which we were supporting people with dementia themselves to become ambassadors for their own rights. And then this really gave us the theoretical framework around dementia-friendly communities, and it gave us more confidence to do what we were doing, and it gave an identity to what we were doing, because previously we were pretty much working in isolation. And this led us to develop the project Out and About with Dementia, which is what I will try and explain to you. And it's a project which is about the process, protagonism, and working with people with dementia. And so hopefully I will be able to give you some practical examples about how we do that. But I just want to take one step back and talk about unboxing the problem, which Borja did very well. But I will put it in this way, that people with dementia, as many older people experience, do no longer live as part of their community. They no longer are seen to have a value, either economic or social. They withdraw from their hobbies, their social life, and so on. And if we actually question why does this happen? And yes, certainly dementia symptoms and the series of disabilities and difficulties that are brought on by having dementia causes this change. But probably more strongly is the stigma and the fear and the embarrassment and misunderstanding and being judged for behaviours that might seem strange in society has perhaps a bigger impact on stopping people doing things from what they want to be doing and living their rights and their life as they would like to. And in addition to this, there are a whole series of invisible and visible barriers which stop people from being part of their community and accessing their rights. And Borja touched on this beforehand. And this obviously is part of the age-friendly community agenda. So what we're saying is that when you redefine the problem, then it actually redefines the interventions that you need to carry out, and that the problem isn't actually dementia. The problem is to do with the community around people with dementia, and that together we can make some of these changes. So raising people's voices. I will give you a quote from Gina, who says, "There can be more than one expert for a single subject, 3 or 4. We need to try and listen to all the experts so that little by little we can tell the story of Alzheimer's from all its different point of views." And I am certainly not an expert on dementia, but some of the people that you can see in the photos they are people who are living with dementia, or they are care workers. And when we listen to their messages, generally their messages and their words are better heard and reach the right place to make people want to create the changes. And so that's one of the reasons that we are working within the rights agenda. Obviously, I will turn to people with dementia to give you examples of what they say dementia is. So dementia is a disease. A person with dementia is a person. And so we often talk about putting the person before the disease. And this is what Nina feels, who is a resident at the refuge. You need help, but the people around you don't accept your need. So it's also about education, says Giuseppina. Clotilde says, "I do ridiculous things, but I'm not ridiculous." So I think you get an idea of the kind of prejudice and stereotypes that they are encountering in their communities. Now, I just want to show you a short video that lasts for 3 minutes, which was developed by Alzheimer's Scotland, which describes what a dementia-friendly community is, before I go on to explain how we're doing it here. So I hope you enjoy it. It's quite short. No, I don't think the video is going to play, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. No. Okay, I'm really sorry. If you get a chance, look for the video on YouTube called "Small Changes Make a Difference," which is by Alzheimer's Scotland, and it describes the day in a life of a person with dementia and how the community and the attitudes of people around them can make a difference to their day. I will just go forward one. These are the things then that people in Italy told us they wanted to do. I'm just looking at the time. They told us that they wanted to be more out and about. They wanted to be part of their community, and they wanted to do run their own errands. They wanted to continue to do sport. They wanted to be part of community activities and events. They wanted to eat in restaurants. They wanted to continue to go for outings on a Sunday with their family for a walk in the mountains. They wanted to continue to work and to volunteer. They wanted to continue to go on holiday and be able to participate in the activities in museums and galleries and so on. And one of the interesting things is that they often told us that there is a stereotype that old women sew and old men play bulls and cards. And obviously, most stereotypes have a reality within that. But actually, they also told us that when they're no longer able to do some of these things, they would really like to try new things. So that was quite a strong learning curve for us in tackling our own stereotypes. So this is what people with dementia told us they would like to do. And so Out and About with Dementia was developed, and we worked from 2015 from a series of partners, the local municipal councils, and the Veister, which is a state-run care home in Kortrijk in Belgium, and a media partner. And so all the project that we ran in Italy was also run in Belgium, and it had these 4 aims, which were to involve people in decision making about their community, and to be involved in the project process, not just benefiting from the results. People with dementia told us they wanted more opportunities of different kinds. So they wanted the opportunities that I explained before, but also if you go to have a day out in a town, perhaps you want to go and have a shower somewhere because you need to change your clothes. Perhaps you need to go to the post office. So it's not just about creating dementia-friendly opportunities in isolation. It's about how things work together and joining the dots between the resources and the opportunities that exist in a locality. And it's also about understanding, because they told us they wanted to live in places where people understood what dementia was, so that they didn't receive strange looks and the judgment that comes with being seen as different. And so we developed or are developing in the Valpellice Valley and in Kortrijk dementia-friendly communities. And we were awarded in Valpellice the recognition in 2017 and again in 2018 from the Alzheimer's Federation in Italy. The fact that we are now one of, I think they're now 16 dementia-friendly communities in Italy. And so the next phase is actually consolidating what are, we have around 113 community collaborators who are working with us to become dementia friendly. And so we're trying to move beyond just the entity becoming dementia friendly, but actually developing this further and looking at their staffing policies and so on as to how they can consolidate being dementia friendly. We're looking at scaling up the project from 2 municipal principalities to a town nearby, Pinerolo, to the other municipalities in the valley. This is also happening in Belgium, and we're also looking to expand the model to Slovakia. And the demystifying is something we found that was necessary, and Borja touched on it as well, which is when you talk about people with dementia participating and having a voice, often people don't really know how to do that. And they think that you need a whole series of instruments and boards, and which can be the case. but actually it generally is, it means meeting with people and talking with them. So we find that there is a huge need for demystifying what participation and listening to people means. So to be very practical, this is the model, the project process that we have followed and are following. So number one is identifying the collaborators with people with dementia. So literally going out about in the community and identifying who they would like to work with. And this can be a bank, a church, a newsagent, a tobacconist, a chemist, a bar. And they identified the categories and then the individual places that they felt were already most welcoming to them. We then deliver a training session together with people with dementia using drawing and video and reminiscence to allow people with dementia themselves to explain how they live and how they could live better with dementia. And then we follow that up with, if you like, a testing or an evaluation where we actually go and we eat in the restaurant, or we go and visit the museum, or we go and buy a newspaper. And we have a very simple questionnaire that was developed by people with dementia that allows them to give feedback on the very practical, real situation. Following that, we develop an action plan with the collaborator to bring about some of these changes, and we give them support to do that if they need it. And this has led to a number of visible changes and invisible changes, so the soft changes. So while perhaps it's quite easy for people to see how they can develop a ramp, how they can change the signage, how they can change the height of the desk at the front of the shop. The most difficult thing, but actually the most successful thing about this approach is the invisible changes, the changes that happen inside people that change the way they think about people with dementia, and they begin really listening to them and seeing that there is a person that still has a number of desires and a desire to live well and a desire to do things and learn things. And this enables them to empowers them to want to make the changes that create both physically and socially an environment that is more adapted to people with dementia. So the next stage, I'm going to speed up, I'm sorry, are the holiday exchanges, whereby with Belgium we spent a week's holiday in each of the two communities in order to evaluate how effective the changes had been and whether it was possible to visit for a week these communities as a person with dementia, as a caregiver of somebody with dementia, and enjoy it and have a good time and feel like an important person. As Franca once said, she felt when she was there. A very important part of the project has been the recognising and informing about the project. So we have a project brochure both about Valpellice and Kortrijk. The media partner and the partnership we have with our communications office has been incredibly important to get the message out there. And the fact that people with dementia are those that are actually bringing these messages makes the message stronger. And there is also obviously the logos that you can see there. One is associated with the Alzheimer Federation in Italy, and the other one is a local logo which was developed as part of an intergenerational project with people with dementia and the local design school. So this is the model that we are developing and adapting. Just a couple of numbers before I close, which is that we've had over 200 people being involved with dementia, 113 collaborating business and services from, as I said before, the post office, from banks to restaurants to a gym. So there is a real range of community activities. I think, as I said, the media has been really important because it has meant that we've been able to access over 2,000 people who have, among the public, who have viewed the material and so on. But I'd rather talk about the challenges, which is that going at the pace of people with dementia can sometimes be hard, especially when we're talking about project frameworks. And also the project works responsibly and not prescriptively. So it is a different kind of project. We can't necessarily write out right at the beginning exactly what we're going to achieve. It's quite difficult to maintain the enthusiasm and the commitment of the collaborators and think about the next step so that we're not basically delivering some training and giving them a sticker and then walking away. Keeping the project alive is a constant challenge. Obviously, nothing is ever perfect, and it's interesting that the approach, the rights approach and the community approach is well understood in the community, and people say it makes sense and are often approaching us to be involved in the project. But taking this approach into our own organisation and own structure can sometimes be more difficult, as it can be difficult taking this approach into existing and established social and health services. And then obviously there are the resource issues, but I'm sure we're all aware of those. So what's facilitated this particular model? The focus is the community, not dementia, so it changes what the problem is. Focusing on tourism means tourism is a common, most people have a positive view of tourism, which they don't necessarily have about dementia. So developing dementia-friendly tourism allows people to access the issue of dementia slightly more easily sometimes. The fact that we're a residential care centre and not a lobbying organisation means that we actually have interaction every day with people with dementia. So that keeps our feet on the ground. The fact that the process has lots of the project process has different stages and different kinds of activities. So we're able to involve people with dementia according to their abilities, their disabilities, their interests, rather than there being one particular activity which is only suited or adapted to a certain group of people. For example, speaking publicly is something that we love doing with people with dementia, and we are able to do, but it is not always possible. There is the economic motivation provided by the holiday exchanges, which is really important for the community as a whole and the collaborators. I've already mentioned the media partner. The exchange with other projects around the world, and this really gave us the confidence to be able to go out and say we really believe in what we're doing because we're part of this global movement. And then associated with the fact that we're a care home, we don't have people who are at the beginning stage, the early stages of dementia. We're often working with people in the very late stages of dementia. So we're looking at quite difficult situations in which we're trying to get people or support people with dementia to express themselves and express their views and choices. And then there is the other thing that facilitated this approach, and certainly taking it forward, was the mainstreaming and recognition. And so the four aspects here are the mainstreaming within organisations like the local health authority and the social services through their involvement in promoting and running the project. The EFID network I have already mentioned, the Alzheimer Federation in Italy, and their recognition of the various communities has been incredibly important. And on a local level, the visibility of people with dementia and the fact that when you are a dementia-friendly organisation, activity, location that people go and they spend money, and so this helps legitimise the approach and people's commitment to it. I won't talk about this. These are just examples of how people with dementia are contributing both socially and economically to the community that are part of the. This is part of our work and our project. And to finish then, I think that what we've been able to show through this project is that people with dementia really do have a voice and they have a right to be heard. And this is what they're telling us, not what we're having to go and tell other people. They're showing us that living well with dementia is possible, and that inclusion in the community and in decision making which affects them is also possible. So through this model, we are able to provide examples and give people these opportunities. And the process of being involved in a project like this is actually part of living well with dementia, because there is no cure for dementia. You can only manage the symptoms. And so the more people are socially involved and active and cognitively stimulated and feel that they have a value and are able to contribute, then the slower the dementia progresses. So the project process is as important as the outcomes of the awareness raising and the changes that happen in society. And as Madalena tells us, she was a resident in the refuge, and she said, I don't feel ill, I feel normal. I have a normal life here, nice and without too many complications. So thank you ever so much. I'm really pleased to have been part of this webinar. I'm looking forward to listening to Sian. Here are some resources that you can look up, and we would love you to share with us, or to share this information, share our project. We'd love you to give us some feedback. We'd love you to come and visit us, and please do contact us because we'd love to hear more about your work and your opinions on it. Thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Nick now.
Thanks, Molly. That was great. It was really good getting, it followed really well from Borja's presentation. I'm going now to switch to Sian and make you a presenter as well, Sian.
And you've got me. Jolly
yes.
Good. Nick. That's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very, very much. It's been such a privilege to hear Borja and Molly's presentations. So I'm really, really pleased to be part of this webinar. I'm talking about something a bit different, actually. It's the slide. My presentation is really about how we have been working in one very rural community in England to enable local people to respond to the needs and requirements of older people in their community to enable them to stay at home. I'm going to explain a little bit about my organisation and how we work, and then I'm going to talk about particularly about what we have been doing in Somerset. So this is really about grassroots response, community response to the needs of other community members who were struggling to get the care at home they needed to enable them to stay part of their community. So I'm going to have to close something, Nick, because I can't actually. There we are.
Sian?
Yes.
We can't see your slides at the moment.
Okay.
There should be a message.
Can you now?
You can't see your screen, I don't think.
We can see it now, Sian. Yep.
Oh, you can. Lovely.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Now.
Thank you.
Technology and I don't work very well together, so thank you very much. Okay, so the vision of my organisation I suppose comes from a rights basis as well. It's about people having the right to get the help they need to live life the way they want to live it. So it's very practical. We're very practical. Let me just see. Now I can't move my slides now. This just shows you. Right. I'm just going to escape from this and start again. Can you hear me, by the way, guys?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I can't move my slides. Do you know how to help me do that, Nick?
I do. I will get them up now.
I'm showing my screen. Are you going to give me a keyboard and mouse? Is it that?
I'm not sure what's happened here.
Oh, got it. No, it's all right. Can you see the next slide?
Yes, we can see the next slide.
Thank you. I'm sorry this isn't as smooth as your presentations, Molly and Borja. So we are what's called a community interest company in the UK, not-for-profit trading charity, and we're 9 years old. And we were established to use knowledge we had gathered to work through local partners to enable local people to create choice for other people who needed help to live the lives they want. Sorry, it's a bit complex, a complex explanation. So we work across the UK. We started with a desire to create choice, but we became equally motivated by seeing the untapped talents and imagination of people in communities and being enabled to give people the right kind of help to allow them to use that to help other local people. And since 2010, we've worked in nearly 60 areas. We've supported more than 5,000 of what we call community-led care enterprises, and over 15,000 people have benefited. This is also about job creation in some very disadvantaged areas, so 7,000 plus jobs created. Our community care enterprises, these are local people, often individuals, who are want to deliver a support and service to somebody or a small number of people in their community. And our role is to help them to do that legally, sustainably, and to a high quality. We work with all sorts of business structures, from unformed community groups to much more complex charities and cooperatives, and all points in between. And numbers of the people we work with are sole traders. They are people who deliver this service themselves and are earning an income from this. We have a particular, I'm not going to work through all of that, we're capacity building, so we go into an area for 2 or 3 years to create the environment in which community enterprise can flourish, and then we leave, enabling, working on the basis that the organisations we've worked through will continue that work once we've left. We employ a local catalyst, an individual who has a particular skill set around in a opportunistic, connecting, collaborative, seeing opportunities, enabling people to understand what's needed and to make a response to that. And what we provide centrally is a sort of anorak expertise around how very small organizations can comply with regulation and legislation and bureaucracies that is designed for bigger stuff, bigger organizations. And at the same time that we work with communities to find people who are going to respond to the requirements of other local people, we work with public bodies to help them understand what they need to do to make create the environment in which this is possible. So a lot of it for them is getting out of the way. There's certainly an awful lot about culture change, about helping frontline advisors understand the choice that's out there for people, and being prepared to give people information about what's out there. So people giving up control, really, but also systems and processes that are designed for big organisations that get in the way. So we work with public bodies and communities at the same time these days. And we have a very strong focus on quality, safety and sustainability, as you would expect. We're very lucky because we've worked across 60 communities, just about. We have never found a community where there weren't amazing people wanting to do good stuff for other people and just needing that little bit of help. It's very, we're very lucky because it's very positive, inspiring stuff at a time when a lot of people working in our sector are struggling with real challenges. So we're very, very fortunate. So Somerset is in southwest England. It's a coastal county, as you can see, extremely rural. And they had a problem. So West and South Somerset are the most rural areas of the county, very dispersed populations, difficult travel, and people living there have the highest average age in the country. And traditional home care services, the big organisations delivering home care at scale, were not able to offer affordable care in those areas. Mostly they wouldn't offer it at all because it was not an acceptable, it wasn't possible to deliver this at a cost that was acceptable, and they couldn't recruit staff in those areas. And the challenge was that older people in particular, were not able to get out of hospital in a timely fashion, and that was leaving the local authority at risk of being fined for delays in hospital discharge. And also people were having to go into residential care far too early and were cut off from their communities. So we had a 2-year contract initially with the local authority, asking us to focus on working through local communities to stimulate a response from the community to deliver care at home in different ways for people who needed that. So our local catalyst was a local person, very good local links anyway, and he would tell you that he works humbly. So that he goes into local communities and he tries to understand what's working really, really well at the moment, where the energy is in that community, who are the people who are going to make this project work, who want to make a difference to their community, and he listens. So he would say he drinks cups of tea all day talking to people who might be able to help and who might be interested in the project. And in each community, we worked across 16 villages, and the areas in between, and in each village there was energy was in a different place. So this is not what you'd call a cookie cutter approach at all. It's an approach which is infinitely adaptable. So in one area it was a parish council, a local council structure. In another area it was a faith community or a GP practice or a voluntary sector organisation. So we worked to understand what was needed. We helped local people respond to that and to do that in a way that was legal, sustainable and high quality. And we worked with the local authority to tackle cultural and systems barriers, and that is an ongoing process. In fact, the local authority did 2 important things almost at the beginning, which made this programme of work incredibly well and very quickly. That both were about giving up power. The local authority gave everybody who needed help to stay at home and what's called a direct payment in England, which is a budget, a cash payment to enable them to buy that care. And at the same time, they gave information about what was out there. And that is actually quite rare, because a lot of these little enterprises didn't look like an enterprise people were used to referring to. It was a single person delivering care in their community. And so the being prepared to make that information available is very unusual in our experience. And after 4 years, we worked, the third year we were funded by a local hospice in part, and that was to enable people with palliative care needs to stay at home. And then the fourth year was really about consolidating all we'd done. So we have 277 enterprises, 274 of which were brand new. So this is, and they are supporting 3,000 people to stay at home. And there are 10,000 hours of care provided each week. So this is about scale in a very different way. It's about scaling out each enterprise. If you do the sums, you'll realize that people are supporting 3 or 4 people in their neighborhood, but there are lots of them. And so together they create amazing scale. They also create local jobs in an area which had work poverty. And these are some stories. I thought I'd actually tell a story which relates to your presentation, Molly, because one of the very, very early enterprises was run by a man whose wife had dementia and whom he cared for at home until she died. And when, after she died, he wanted to, he knew that the poverty of service for people with dementia in the areas he lived in, that there was very little available, and what was available wasn't suitable for many people. He also knew the importance, and it fits with what you're talking about, Molly, the importance of people being able to continue their hobbies, to continue to live life. And so he set up an enterprise which was all about helping people carry on doing what they were doing, you know, going fishing, going bowling, going to play bingo, whatever it was that they really, really enjoyed. So helping people to do that, and also helping people to do new things. So a kind of similar approach, but by one individual. And he's been very, very successful with his enterprise. He employs 4 other people now. It's very co-produced, so it's designed with the person and their family, each little service, and a number of the people. He also has a number of volunteers who include people with dementia. So it's a very interesting enterprise and very successful. Heather's an example of somebody who has a background in care, mental health, social care, and who had been shocked by the lack of support there was, lack of community support there was for people with older people with mental health problems. And so, and she, as a social worker, she was having to go to people and say, no, there was nothing available, and she just couldn't bear it. And so what she did was set up in her village, small town called South Petherton in Somerset. She set up a support service which is designed with older people with mental health problems to provide the services that allow them not just to be supported at home, but to reconnect with their community and to do the stuff they want to do. Sharon is another example of somebody who we have a number of people who have experienced at first hand the lack of really great local tailored support for people, and who want to make a difference. So that's one of the big motivators for people. She also, so Sharon's another example, what she says, and it's another aspect of motivating, is that she's able to, as a self-employed person, she can organize her time for herself as well as the people she supports. So it gives her freedom, and it gives her control of her own life, as well as help, knowing that she's making a difference to the lives of other people. It's probably worth me saying that one of the big motivators for people is that this is about relationship. This is about doing something, providing support in a way that the other person really values, but also being able to have a real relationship which they value, which everybody values, both parties value. And the relationship is a great motivator. It's partly about income, obviously, but it's also about feeling valued and feeling, caring for the people they're supporting. So impact, well, older people are well supported at home. 3,000 people who weren't getting support are. The co-design is important, so people are getting support in the way they want. Our community entrepreneurs are able to work locally and earn an income. Commissioners who have found this quite tricky at times because they saw it as high risk are beginning to feel very comfortable about the quality of the support provided, and people can come home early from hospital. People stay connected to the community. It's interesting because what local people providing care bring is their community as well as the care, if that makes sense to you. So they bring the gossip, they bring local information. Many of them go well beyond what they're being asked to do, and will, if they're going to a church event, will take people with them and help reconnect people in that way. Impact on people's lives, we do obviously all sorts of analysis to make sure this is actually working for individuals, and this was just one feedback we got, which just showed how people valued the independence they were gaining, the reliability and consistency of the support they were giving, that the people they were supporting they liked, and that they felt valued. This is a story which came from our third year when we were working with a very big focus on supporting people with palliative care needs, and it just illustrates the flexibility of community enterprise. So this is a man who wanted to die at home. He had very complex support needs. He needed 24-hour support, and a combination of more traditional agency support with 3 community entrepreneurs, in fact, enabled Jerry to stay at home and to die at home, and the family to get really, really good support. And this is a quote from Jerry's wife, who continues to see the community entrepreneurs that supported Jerry, who've become friends, which is a great outcome. These are all the microproviders. We have connected them up to each other. We have 16 networks now based on the different villages, based on different structures within the villages. And these networks are, these are people in the networks. People meet up and provide mutual support to each other, but also this is about mutual monitoring, because it's very important to people in those networks that everybody has a good reputation. If the networks are set up quite formally so that it's possible there are routes in and out of the network, and the network members are very alert to, because they're local, to any concerns about the quality of care of any one of their members. We have a careful approach to excluding people from networks, because sometimes, of course, networks don't operate always fairly. But if there is any concerns about quality, we'll get to network members very quickly, and then there's a process for understanding what's going on, and then if necessary, excluding people from the network. It's a new workforce. This is very important in England, where there is a real challenge with recruiting people to provide care. So 38% of our community entrepreneurs have no formal experience but want to make a difference in their community, wouldn't work for a traditional provider. And 21% have formal experience in care but want to work in different ways. So 7% of them are already delivering something like this and want to diversify. This is not just about preventative services. 58% of them offer personal care, which is often provided alongside other kinds of informal help that people need to stay at home. And we ensure quality through an advice framework and local accountability. But in addition, the Care Quality Commission is the regulator for social care in England, and we're working with that regulator and also the organisation that sets qualifications for care workers to ensure that our advice framework maps formally to their regulatory requirements and to develop a tailored qualification. And that's because we're continually trying to ensure and improve the quality of the work people are doing. And as I said, this was possible, the numbers were possible because of the commitment of the local authority to both whole system transformation and to sharing power, to giving people direct payments, to giving people information, and to a focus at senior level all the way down on allowing good risk taking and removing people's fear of blame. And if you wanted more information, do contact me. Thank you very much for the privilege of talking to you today.
Thank you very much, Sean, Molly, and Borja for the 3 excellent presentations. I will take the screen now from Sean. Just show my screen, just that you should be able to see it. Yes, thank you very much. So I didn't want to stop any of the presenters because it was very interesting. So we had one general presentation about tackling ageism, tackling and the different barriers and problems and discrimination people face in old age from Borja, and then two very good examples about how to break down some of these barriers and the excellent examples of working together with the local authorities, local communities to support older people to live the lives they want. So thank you very much for that. Do we have a question from the participants? We have one question, so maybe I wouldn't keep you much longer, because we are already almost at the end of our webinar, but maybe we can take one question. So we have Cesar. I will give you the microphone. We'll unmute your microphone. Cesar, you should be able to speak, yes?
Yes, I actually have 2 questions, one for Borja and one for Molly.
Go ahead,
The
Cesar.
one for Borja was about his opinion I would like to know his opinion on the care centers, and the one for Molly was, as my personal opinion, is that people in villages in Italy like to interact with other people, but only for a while. That's why they have to end up staying at a residential home. What do you think about that?
Okay, thank you, Cesar. So the question was, I think both your questions were about residential care homes. So what is Borja's opinion about that? And also to Molly, so yes, people are in a residential care center. So how much, I guess the question would be, how much freedom do they have within that residential care center as well? Because you talk mostly about their free time, and whether maybe they can stay at home if they want to rather than going into residential care. So maybe Borja, you first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you for the question. So this is a topic we have discussed quite a lot within my organization, and it's not always been, let's say, easy to have a clear-cut response. So we have known of very good examples of really people doing great efforts to improve quality of residential care, and I think Molly's example is a great illustration of that. I think what's important is also the fact that Molly is working on the dementia friendly kind of villages or environments project, which means that, well, from the service itself, there is a willingness to make a connection with the community that can better welcome people with dementia and can make people be active and live well in the community and really be part of it. So you know, I mean, I let's say, I think that when we talk about the rights of all people, when we talk about care models, I think certainly we have to move towards that all people prefer, which is staying at home and be involved in that way in the community. So having community-based services. Then, well, I have really little to say about an example like that of Molly, and also taking into account how, you know, great work they are doing with dementia-friendly environments. So that would be my response. But Molly, yeah, you have to.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, and thank you for the question. I will say that a residential care home in Italy, if you like, is quite a rare place for somebody to be, and increasingly people only come into a care home when they have extremely complex needs. And I would say that this is generally to do with the fact that the cost of healthcare and the cost of being in a residential care home in Italy is one of the highest in Europe compared to incomes or pensions. And so if it is a possibility, if there's the possibility of avoiding it, then most people will try to. The problem is that the solutions for living at home don't really exist. As Sian was saying, we're in a rural area where there are state-provided services and there are private services, but again, they don't necessarily reach the places they need to be. One of the things about dementia in particular in Italy is that 40% of people with dementia don't have a diagnosis, and 2/3 of these people actually live in the community. So the majority of people are living at home, but with a lack of services. So I hope that that in part answers your question. We run an Alzheimer's cafe and a home care service. And so it is also a way of offering linked up services where we come into contact with people at a very early stage and are able to support them through the various needs that they have during the progression of the dementia. Actually, within the care home, we run a series of non-pharmacological therapies, so people have access to all sorts of things from pet therapy to singing to the everyday activities. But what we're working towards is actually providing these services within the community, because as Sian was explaining, when these are connected to communities and to real people and relationships, they're more effective and more appreciated, and people enjoy the quality of those of their life more. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly, for clarifying that as well, for the additional information. So because we are getting very close to, well, 12:30 CET, the end of the webinar, I would wrap up just to say if anyone has any questions, please do email Nick or myself, and we can direct the questions to one of the speakers. You can also, this webinar is being recorded, so it's possible to listen to it again or to forward to other people. Finally, just to give you a little bit information about what follows. So we've come to the end of this year's series of webinars, the end of the year. Next year, we will have a review at the beginning of the year. We will meet with some of the people involved in ECCL, and we will see what people would like next year, whether it is more webinars or how best we can share information about all the different things going around Europe in terms of the different practical support and different solutions and services provided in all sorts of places for people with different types of support needs. And then we will announce the program in January or at the beginning of February, actually. So if you have anything, we will share the presentations as well with everyone. We will share the link to the webinar recording. And if there is anything else you would like to share, do email us. Finally, a little bit at the end about our mailing list. So we do keep an ECCL mailing list. Nick gets out a newsletter once a month with some interesting information, and the information also about our next activities. So if you would like to be on the mailing list or you would like to share with your colleagues, please do go ahead. And finally, thank you ever so much to all our three presenters, Borja, Molly, and Sian, for giving up your time today and for sharing this really valuable information that I'm sure will be useful to lots of people. So I will say bye. And I will close the webinar. If you want to say bye, go ahead.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. I wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and hope to stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.